Okay, well, I think it is right at 7. I'll go ahead and start. I'll kick it off here. I think before Jim starts his presentation, I've got a few opening slides, and I think by the time we get through them, hopefully we'll have our critical mass of folks who plan to join tonight. So thank you everyone for attending our first quarter Environmental Sustainability Board Learning Academy session. And my name is Rajiv Pandya. I'm the chair of the ESB of the City of Bel Air ESB. And our presenter tonight is going to be Mr. Jim Blackburn. And I'm going to give an intro of him here in a minute and kind of go over his bio. But the topic tonight is going to be Houston area rainfall and climate change, preparing for the future. So anyways, you can go to the next slide, Jim. So a little bit of background about the ESB Learning Academy. So essentially, the ESB, it's a non-statutory board for the City of Bel Air, and really our role is to make advisory recommendations to the city council, in the initiation, prioritization, and development of public education programs, policies, and actions relating to environmental sustainability. We have 7 Bel Air residents that are appointed to the ESB by City Council and serve on 2-year terms with a maximum of 3 consecutive terms. So you can be on it for 6 years maximum. So showing there the list of members, myself as the chair, and then we have the other members listed there, and our City Council liaison is Dr. Catherine Lewis, and our Public Works liaison is Michael Leach. And we pretty much are doing these sessions every quarter since first quarter of 2021. So this is our 5th one, and the topics have ranged from solar energy and electric vehicle chargers to composting and green waste recycling. We had one, and then we had one last quarter on the global energy transition. And so that was a really interesting session we had there. For the session today, the audience will be muted, and questions will be through the chat feature that all of you hopefully can see there. There's a Q&A, sort of a chat feature. So feel free to put your questions or thoughts in there, and we'll try our hardest to sort of group them and get them to Jim here, at least a couple points. We've got a stopping point organized in the middle of his presentation. And then of course, at the end, we're going to try to end at the top of the hour or maybe a little bit after 8 p.m. accordingly. So, okay, we can go to the next slide, Jim. Okay, so about the speaker. So Jim Blackburn is an environmental lawyer and environmental law professor at Rice University, and he's a faculty scholar at the Baker Institute. He's also co-director of SPEED. I think it's the S. I don't know if it's silent, but it's SPEED. Severe Storm Prevention Education Evacuation from Disaster, the SPEED Center. And Jim has, many accomplishments. He's one of his current projects is establishment of a new soil carbon storage standard called B Carbon, and implementing the Galveston Bay Park Plan through the SPEED Center. He's also the CEO of the nonprofit B Carbon, which is a carbon credit certification company in which the company was a finalist here at the recent 2021 Glasgow COP26 summit. And it was under the category of a Climate Cup Challenge, where it placed, what did you say? Maybe I think it was 3rd or 4th place, something along that line. But anyways, and then the other notable achievements there, I won't read every one, but these are just various, achievements that Jim has had. And I think the 2 that kind of jump out at me are the International Crane Foundation Good Egg Award. Jim is a avid, environmentalist, of course, but also into birding and cranes. So I think that's super important, within our ecosystem here in Texas. Also the Barbara C. Jordan Community Advocate Award from Texas Southern University. Those seem like fantastic achievements as well as the other ones listed there. His website, jimblackburninfo.com, is shown. And also, I wanted to highlight, very importantly, is a book that he just published with an illustrator named Isabel Scurry Chapman. And it's a book called Earth Church. And it's based on, it's a book about earth-based spirituality, which seems super interesting. And it was just published recently. So yeah, maybe at some point, Jim, maybe you can even touch on that a little bit as well, in addition to your other slides that you're going to cover. So, okay. So with that, Jim, we can go ahead and kick off and start your presentation.
Okay, well, thank you, Rajiv. And I want to start off with an image of my favorite climate scientist, Dr. Catherine Hayhope from Texas Tech University. And she's an evangelical Christian. And she starts off a presentation. The one time I heard her, she kind of shocked me. She started off by saying, "I don't believe in climate change." And, everyone in the audience kind of looked at each other, kind of, well, I thought we were hearing somebody talk about climate change. She goes, "Climate change is a fact. I believe in my spiritual belief, in my religious belief. That's a belief. But climate change is fact. It's science." And I think that's a great way for us to start. This is a slide from back in February of 2018, where the consensus was from the Speed Center conference back at that time, that we're going to have in the future storms that will be bigger. We're going to have more Category 3, 4, and 5 storms. We're going to have more rapid intensification. We're going to have more rainfall. And I think we've got to at least start off by telling the truth about the climate realities of the future. I think we've lost 20 years in arguing about climate change and not thinking sufficiently about adaptation to this climate change. This is the Flood Control District publication about Tropical Storm Allison and how it was off the charts. And in a way, it's a very misleading, I think at the time, they thought it was a very accurate depiction of our characterization of Allison. But I think it kind of makes it seem like it's aberrant. It's not going to happen again. And in fact, we've had many off the chart events. The climate has already changed 1 degree centigrade between 1901 and 2012. That's fact. It's happened. It has occurred. So when we're talking about with the Paris Accords keeping the change at 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees Celsius, we're talking about only a 5/10 or 1 degree increase from where we are now. It's not like we're going to have all of that increase in the future. It has already occurred. Now, I want to talk a little bit about statistics, and I'm no great statistician, but I think all of us have seen the bell curve, this kind of image in front of me with the average right there in the middle. And I want to talk about the 100-year flood in the context of this bell curve. And the 100-year flood is the 1% event. It's the event that occurs relatively rarely, or certainly should be occurring relatively rarely. And that's where Tropical Storm Allison falls on this curve. That's where the Tax Day storm falls on this curve. That's where Harvey falls. By the statistics in effect at the time Harvey came, it could have been, I think it was considered somewhere between a 10,000 and a 30,000 year storm, as opposed to a 100-year storm. And then there's Imelda in 2019. Now, that's not the way rainfall patterns should look. That's what climate change looks like, where you have these rare events occurring over and over and over again. That shows that basically the statistics that we have looked at in the past are changing. And it is a real mistake to not pay a lot of attention to what's out here on the edge, if you will. This is Bray's Bayou. Bray's Bayou, of course, is a key aspect of the flooding future, if you will, of Bel Air, and certainly the flooding past. This is Bel Air, this is Bray's Bayou during Harvey. And excuse me. And there are basically three images here, right at the beginning of Harvey, into Harvey, and at the height of the flooding of Harvey. Dr. Phil Beatty at Rice has recently analyzed tropical storm or Hurricane Harvey in the context of a revised statistical review. And his conclusion is it is today more likely between a 35 and a 70-year recurrent storm than any, that's his best estimate of what the recurrence interval of a Harvey will be in the future. I mean, looking forward from today, it is less than a 100-year storm. It's hard for all of us to imagine. Now think about Harris County and think about the flooding that we had in Harvey. And these are the population by watershed that we have across the county. We have 23 watersheds. By far, Brays Bayou has the highest population of any of them, followed by Greens Bayou, which under this in this imagery, Halls Bayou included in part of Greens. Now to go back over here, Brays Bayou, of course, comes through the comes just to the south of Bel Air, coming down through the southwest part of town and south of Rice University and empties into Buffalo Bayou. When we're talking about Greens and Halls Bayou, which I'll also talk about a good bit in this, the Greens Bayou actually comes out and comes around. Halls Bayou rises in the city and comes across, really across 59 and 45 and Hardy Toll Road, about the middle of this yellow area. Those are the two most populated watersheds that we have in Harris County. The third most would be, I think it looks like Buffalo is in there, and the fourth maybe White Oak, which are really the bayous that drain most of the city of Houston. If you look at homes that were flooded during Harvey on a watershed by watershed basis, what you see is that Brays Bayou certainly had the most, but Greens and Halls are right with it. And if you look in terms of relative to the total population, Greens and Halls fared worse than the Brays Bayou watershed did during Harvey. And several other of our watersheds did even worse than Greens and Halls. But the initial point I want to make, and it's an important one, is that this 100-year floodplain map, the current 100-year floodplain map, is obsolete and it's dangerous. It is something that should not be depended upon. Period.
Hey, Jim, if I could interrupt, Jim. We can see the slides, we can see your pointer, but your video seems to be frozen. We can see your face, but you're, you want to like maybe turn your video off and then turn it on again, or maybe that'll sort of.
Let's hang on a second. Let me take us out of screen sharing.
Yeah, I think screen share. I think screen share is okay. I think it's just your video.
It says the Zoom meetings is not responding. Not sure what you think about that.
Okay, well then don't worry about it. Just keep going. We can see you.
Well,
we can see your face. Yeah, we can see your face and everything. It's just that we can't. Well,
I may have just fouled it up.
Yeah. Anyways, think we're probably fine. Jim, are you there? Uh-oh. Michael, are you there? Cheryl?
Yeah, just a second, everybody. We'll figure this out. Just a moment, please.
Oh, did he dropped out, did he? Oh no. No, I shouldn't have said anything. He was basically doing fine. I didn't expect that he would completely drop out. Sure.
We should be able to get him back in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he should be able to hop right back on.
Right.
Yeah, sorry about that. I thought it would just, I thought if he would just turn his video off and then on, that'd be okay, but looks like it was some other problem. Oh, okay, Jim.
Can you see
can-
me?
Yes, I can see you now. We can see you moving
Sorry
your
about
head. And
that. I will hopefully return
yeah,
to where I was if I can discover
yeah, I
that.
think you were on slide 17 is when you were
Right.
on. So
Has that shown up yet?
the screen share, no.
Okay, hang on a second. There it is. Okay, number 17. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, can you see that and can you see me?
Sure can. Yep. I
Okay,
think we're good
sorry
to go.
for that delay. For some reason, it froze up and I needed to go out and reconnect. So what I was talking about was this 100-year floodplain map. That is the current official map. This is used by TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, for hazardous waste permitting. It is used for landfill siting. It is used for all types of federal environmental requirements. Locally, we have adopted, at least in Harris County and in the city of Houston, we have adopted more recently the 500-year floodplain to use for basically building permitting purposes until the new 100-year floodplain map is produced and released. Now, that new 100-year floodplain map will be based upon NOAA Atlas 14, which is shown here in green. Our old 100-year event, and the one of concern is the 24-hour 100-year event. And that's 13.2 inches of rain in 24 hours. The new, man, this is generalized across Harris County. The new NOAA Atlas 14 100-year event is 17 inches in 24 hours. Harris County is preparing these maps at the current time. I think they're very paranoid about the release of these new 100-year floodplain maps because they're going to show a significant increase in the 100-year floodplain throughout Harris County because we're increasing our 100-year rainfall from 17 inches in 24 hours or from 13. But take a look at these the storms that are set out here in the red block. Imelda was 21 inches. Harvey was 25 inches in 24 hours. Tax Day was 17.4. Allison was 28. And a storm back in October of 94 was 20.9. Now, where our new standard is 17 inches. And we have 5 storm events, probably more than that if we were to really delve, in the last 20 years that have exceeded our so-called 100-year rainfall. My concern is that the way that we are statistically analyzing rainfall in this era of climate change is obsolete and will lead to wrongful and frankly dangerous results. I don't think these new floodplain maps, however large they are going to be large enough to accurately characterize the flooding risk that we're going to have in this community. Now, a lot of people get nervous about 100-year floodplain maps because they're regulatory in nature, but they're also informational in nature. And, you know, I feel much more comfortable, frankly, using the NOAA 500-year number than I do using the NOAA Atlas 14 100-year number. And think again, where Dr. Bedian was talking about Harvey being a 35 to 70-year recurrence event. These numbers support that line of reasoning. So I just throw that out because I think as we get further into the 21st century, this is only going to worsen. It's not going to get better. Now, this is an image of Harvey flooding up in the Greens and Halls Bayou area. The top, across the top, if you see my cursor, excuse me, that's Beltway 8. The gray line here is Interstate 45 North. This is the Hardy Toll Road. This is Interstate 59, East Tex Freeway. And Loop 610 is way down here at the bottom. This is Halls Bayou coming across the northeast part of the city of Houston. This is Greens Bayou coming across, running roughly parallel to Beltway 8 and coming across and outside of this blue area. This is what's called HEC-RAS modeling. It is a new type of computer modeling, new as of 5 years ago or so, but it shows not only the flooding within the floodplains of the streams themselves, but it also shows the flooding that is occurring overland as the water moves to the streams and bayous. This is, I think, an accurate characterization of the flood risk that exists within the community, but we will never see maps like this when the 100-year rainfall or 100-year floodplain, the new maps come out. And part of what I'm about tonight is to say, I'm about good information coming to the community. And I think it's one thing to have regulatory consequences, and I'm very much aware of how harsh those can be. I think on the other hand, it's really important to understand how water flows in our community, where the blockages are, and what we should do. Some things to just observe on this particular imagery. The Hardy Toll Road appears to be a bit of a blockage relative to Halls Bayou. Up in this area, you can see Interstate 45 as a blockage again on Halls Bayou. With Greens Bayou, you can see a pretty good block up back in this area near where 59 and Greens cross. I think every part of town should be analyzed like this to better understand what it is we're dealing with. There's no reason, there's frankly just almost no way that we can avoid major flooding in major storm events. Maps like the one that I've got here would help us better understand, frankly, where buyouts should occur and possibly where siphons should be placed to get water through interchanges or where tunnel extensions might ought to be considered. Now, under the current bond proposal and under the kind of long-range plan, there are 4 watersheds that are receiving major federal funding through the Corps of Engineers: Hunting, White Oak, Braze, and Clear Creek. Those watersheds are well taken care of. Now, they're well taken care of by old storm standards. These 100-year analyses, if you will, the preventative analysis that was done on these bayous was done back with the old 100-year floodplains in mind. So, for example, on Braze, this 100-year floodplain will be collapsed. And I think, actually, I'm sorry, this is what the new 100-year floodplain using the old 100-year, I'm sorry, this is what the 100-year floodplain using the old 100-year rainfall would look like after Braze Bayou was improved. But when you add NOAA Atlas 14 numbers, when you go from 13 inches to 17 inches, that floodplain is going to expand back out. So even though there have been a lot of improvements on Braze Bayou, the 100-year floodplain is not going to disappear by any stretch and will be, frankly, larger than what is shown on this map, which is the improvement after the placement. The area removed from the 100-year floodplain is the area in orange or in brown. The blue is the residual 100-year floodplain after the Project Braze is completed. And then you're going to see it expand back out. In many respects, it may be somewhat similar to what it was before Project Braze. These are the new realities that are going to come just with NOAA Atlas 14. If you consider really what I would call the real 100-year rainfall, the flooding potential will be greater still. So in many respects, while we are making improvements, we have to be realistic about our understanding of those improvements and understand that they may not be the solutions that we're all hoping for. Now, the county has spent most of its bond money on other watersheds than the ones that received federal projects. And so they were looking to try to optimize the bond money being spent, which was a $2.5 billion bond issue. They add to that the 4 federal watershed projects, and then add to that some of the money that the Department of Housing and Urban Development had provided to Harris County and to the city of Houston. And I mentioned Greens and Halls Bayou because they're quite important. And Greens and Halls were slated to get much of that HUD money. That HUD money got held up by the General Land Office, and most of it has not been received by Harris County or by the city of Houston. Greens Bayou, which was slated to get most of that money from HUD, has been deprived of that money, and right now, both Harris County and the city of Houston is hustling. My vision of the future is that we're absolutely honest about flooding and our floodplain maps. Now, equity is an issue that has arisen in the context of flooding. The watersheds that are most hit with poverty are those shown in red. Greens Bayou and Hunting Bayou are 2 of them, Sims Bayou, and actually Brays Bayou has a lot of poverty in it. Greens has never qualified for a federal project, and the Greens Bayou watershed seems to continually have difficulty in terms of getting its fair share of the flood money. Now, this is an image that talks about the various watersheds in terms of the percentage of population whose homes flooded on a per watershed basis during Harvey. And what you see here is that Hunting Bayou did very poorly. Clear Creek, Cedar Bayou, San Jacinto watershed, Sims Bayou, and Greens Bayou. They collectively were among the worst in Harris County. Those also are predominantly poverty laden watersheds and predominantly minority watersheds. Now, equity has been raised as an issue in flood control throughout Harris County. Equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. Equality is treating everyone the same. Equity is giving everyone what they need to be successful. And equity is a term that Harris County Flood Control District has been using quite a lot lately, and it's caused quite a lot of controversy. But I wanted to at least talk about it a bit because I think it's an important concept. And it's basically that we have not been fair and equal and have not been equitable in the way that we've done flood control protection. Generally speaking, we use money as an indicator. We've got some areas that are poor. The houses are not worth as much as they are in other parts of town. And when you try to look at the cost of a project versus the benefits of the project, a lot of these lower income watersheds don't do quite so well. I can justify a $5 million project by protecting $6 million houses. I cannot justify that project under the Corps of Engineers federal requirement. I can't justify a $5 million project that protects 20 $100,000 houses. So on the one hand, six homesteads can be protected with $5 million, where in another circumstance, 20 homesteads cannot be protected with the $5 million project. That's inequitable. Lower income areas come out worse under our benefit cost framework. The Corps should use flexibility that they have under their regulations to make these adjustments. And ultimately, Congress or the Corps should modify the federal guidelines for undertaking these concepts. Now, I put this issue in front of you. This is I'm very positive about Houston Stronger. It is a group that has formed on the west side to try to address issues associated with flooding in Addicks and Barker Reservoir. There were 10,000 homes that were flooded on the backside of Addicks and Barker. But it's important to note that that flooding took place outside of the 100-year floodplain. That flooding is for a recurrence interval of a storm like a Harvey. It is a level of protection that they're trying to get out in the west side of town that is greater than the level of protection that we probably have in any watershed in the city. So on the one hand, I appreciate very much what they're trying to do. And on the other hand, this concept of equity, we have no real way of measuring equity watershed to watershed. I would like to see some type of evaluation where we look at what level of protection do we have in these different areas. And at this point, Rajiv, we're at the midpoint, and I'd be happy to stop and take a question or two. And again, apologies for the connection problems. I'm not quite sure what happened, but I'm glad we recovered.
Yeah, sure. No worries. No, I think we're making great time, Jim. I think at this point, I just want to, we don't have any questions, but folks, as you're listening to Jim or anything that you've heard so far, just feel free to type them into the Q&A chat there. And, when Jim finishes, we'll have some time for him to answer any questions you have. But at this point, we don't have any questions, Jim, so you can move ahead.
Okay. Well, in proceeding, I want to cover really two topics in the second half of this presentation. I want to talk about coastal flooding, and I also want to talk about really our warning, our thinking about warning and kind of what it tells us about our community. If you look at Harvey, Harvey itself was a very interesting storm. Came across the Caribbean into really the area of kind of coming through really the pass between Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula, actually cut across the Yucatan, and was a tropical storm that basically was low pressure that came across the Yucatan, reformed into a tropical storm on August 23rd, strengthened into a hurricane on August 24th, and became a Category 4 storm and had landfall on the Texas coast on August 25th. Now, that is an incredibly fast, strengthening, where it basically goes from August 23rd into a tropical storm all the way to a Cat 4 making landfall in 2 days. Now, that is the reality of the storms of the future. This is Hurricane Lara. Hurricane Lara, if you look at that big kind of this area right in here, it was a Category 1 at 1 p.m. on Tuesday. 7 a.m. Wednesday, it was a Category 2. It had strengthened to a Category 3 by 7 p.m. Wednesday. And so it went from a 1 to a 3 and was headed for Houston when it was a Category 2. Luckily, it turned. But Lara could easily have come ashore as a strong Category 2, weak Category 3 storm over in the Houston area. Nobody evacuated from Lara because it was only a Category 1 storm, a day before it turned into a Category 3 storm. So this rapid intensification is something that I don't think we have begun to correctly understand, and I don't think we talk about it nearly enough. Now, what am I most worried about? This is Hurricane Ike, which was a Category 2 storm, adding 15% to the wind speed, which puts it into a kind of a large Category 3 storm, maybe a small Category 4. And we have the ability at the Speed Center at Rice to do simulations of computer modeling runs up at the supercomputer at the University of Texas. And we made Ike come ashore in the worst place for Houston, which is down at the far end of Galveston Island. And this storm would absolutely devastate the Houston region. And we are essentially unprotected against this storm. Now, the wave, the surge height here on the Galveston seawall is 20 feet. Seawall's at 17 feet. This is 3 feet over the seawall. It comes over the Texas City levee system and floods the refineries and chemical plants in Texas City, as well as the city of Texas City. It comes all the way into the NASA complex back up here in Clear Lake, and it has a massive flood effect coming up the Houston Ship Channel. That shows 25 feet of surge coming up the Houston Ship Channel. It would cause unimaginable destruction, and we're essentially unprotected from that right now. I'll talk about the coastal spine in a minute, That's intended to help some, but it will not help all that much up here on the channel. This is what would happen. This is an analysis by Jamie Paget of the probability of tank flotation failure. This is her probability analysis. A lot of those tanks in red are going to fail. We're going to have a massive accumulation of oil and hazardous materials that'll first flow into the city of Houston, lower end of Brays, lower end of Sims, lower end of Greens, and into downtown, basically, and then come back out into Galveston Bay. It will, no question about it, be the worst environmental disaster in United States history. The chance of category 3, 4, 5 storms is going up. The chances have increased 25 to 30% since 75. A doubling of category 4 and 5 storms are anticipated in the 21st century. And by the way, there's an analysis that was made after Harvey that basically said a 20-inch rainfall will be about a 5-year storm by 2100 if we don't change things with regard to climate. So this is not getting better. This is the spill volume of kind of anticipated with the surge that I was talking about. About 100 million gallons of oil and hazardous substances will be released. To put that in perspective, the Deepwater Horizon was about 210 million gallons, and it was in the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Exxon Valdez was about 10, 11 million gallons up in the Gulf of Alaska. So this would be a huge amount of a spill contained within the ship channel, the essentially Houston lower kind of east side neighborhoods, and then Galveston Bay. This is the Corps of Engineers coastal spine that they have proposed to address this hurricane problem. This is a sand dune system along the Bolivar Peninsula. This is a hardened structure that will come across Bolivar roads, and there will be a gate structure here. I think this will probably be about 20 feet in elevation. This sand dune system is about 14 feet. The seawall in Galveston is 17 feet, probably needs to be raised to 20 feet. And then this will be a 14-foot dune system. They're also proposing a backside levee system around Galveston, and then a gate up here on Dickinson Bayou and a gate on Clear Lake. This area basically will flood. This identified for non-structural protection. But the point is, even with the coastal spine, if you have a category 5 storm, you're going to see flooding of a significant extent. The coastal spine really protects us only up to about a category 2 storm, mainly again because the Corps of Engineers methodologies do not know how or do not correctly incorporate climate change into the probability analysis. And we really are left with a situation where the Corps can only protect us up to about a category 2 storm, because their methodology shows categories 3, 4, and 5 to be sufficiently rare that we don't need to plan for them. And I think that's absolutely crazy. This is the residential, this is the commercial properties that we're convinced will be flooded with the spine in place, with the big storm coming. And much of that is industrial property up in the ship channel. We show over 575 industrial properties. That includes refineries and chemical plants primarily. 13,000 residences, about 1,200 commercial. It will be in excess of $100 billion in damage. These are some of the facilities in orange and blue that will be flooded up in the Houston ship channel. The Kinder Morgan facility would be over in the Beltway 8 area. Valero would have flooding, and the tanks by ExxonMobil will be going under. And it'll come back up into the backside of the city of Houston. The area in red would be basically inundated and would also be bringing hazardous materials up into these different areas of the city of Houston. We're proposing at Speed Center, the Galveston Bay Park Plan, to offer in-bay protection rather than a gate structure here on Dickinson and up here on Clear Creek. We're proposing that the ship channel be widened and deepened, and that 25-foot levee system be built along the ship channel. Here and here, a gate structure here. The levee connects over to the Texas City levee system over on the south side, and up on the north side onto the highlands over here in Chambers County. With this in place, you would have significant protection, and basically give you protection against the Category 5 storm. With the coastal spine, we would be protected. I would say right now, even with the coastal spine, there is significant vulnerability on the east side of Harris County, the northeast sector of Galveston County, and certainly Bayport, Houston Ship Channel are extremely vulnerable. Now, I want to go back to the concept of this rapidly intensifying storm, Harvey, which strengthened into a hurricane on August 24th. And I want to put this in the context of how we talk about and think about storms in the Houston region. Now, on August 24th, this is an internal forecast by the Corps of Engineers of flooding in Addicks and Barker Reservoir. Now, August 24th, that's when Harvey was out here in the Bay of Campeche, maybe moving, kind of into the waters of the Gulf. These were some of the hottest waters in the world at the time that Harvey came through. So we're talking about August 24th. This is a forecast that was made by the Corps of Engineers. So on Thursday, the storm has not even hit yet. This red line is extremely important because that's what they're estimating Barker Reservoir pool would get to, what elevation. And this blue line is the basically the limits of the government-owned land, and those are elevations. So the government owns to elevation 95 feet, and they were projecting on Thursday before Harvey hit that there would be 4 feet of flooding behind the government-owned land into the private land on the backside of Barker Reservoir. So this was information that the flood control, that the Corps of Engineers developed. It is my understanding they conveyed this to officials at Harris County and the city of Houston, who made the decision not to disseminate this information to the public. On August 26th, this is a updated analysis. Again, for Barker, this is the pool elevation. Now they're projecting that there would be about 9 feet more inundation than the government owns land. So elevation-wise, this goes 9 feet into privately owned lands. They were also saying the similar type of thing about Addicks, and were identified with Addicks, about an additional 6 or 7 feet. Now, again, this was on the 26th. The 24th was Thursday, so this was Saturday. Most major flooding in this area did not occur until Sunday night and Monday morning. So there was still plenty of time to warn the people behind Addicks and Barker. We chose not to. They were identifying on 8/26 that when the first home would be flooded behind Addicks and behind Barker. The public was never given this information. On 8/27, Sunday, 8 o'clock in the morning, even worse projections are being made. But once again, this information was not made available to the public. At 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, they identified not only when the first home would be flooded, but when mandatory releases would be started downstream that would cause flooding downstream on Buffalo Bayou. Now, a lot of massive flooding occurred behind Addicks and Barker. The Harvey pool went as far as the red. The blue is as far as maximum pool could be. And there are probably as many as 20,000 homes back in this area that could be flooded. About 10,000 were flooded behind in that red Harvey pool. The point here is, why did our officials not tell us this information? Do they think that we can't handle being told the truth? That's what I am most worried about, that we are not truthful about this information. Now, look at this image. This is a slide from the Clear Lake area. This image, or this marker, was put up after Hurricane Ike. This was at a major intersection down in the Bay Area, put up by Precinct 2, I believe. It identified how high a Category 4 storm surge would be in the Bay Area at this location, and how high a Category 5 storm would be. It lasted about 2 months. And it was removed because it interfered with home sales. Now think about that. We have the ability to convey information that would save people's lives. But we chose not to display this information because it would interfere with home sales. We're more worried about selling homes than we are protecting people's lives and telling them the truth about flooding. I think that's a problem. I think that says a lot about our community, and none of it being particularly good. My biggest worry going forward is that we're going to have the same thinking and the same results. My concern is that we've got a framework of thinking about flooding, and we have been unwilling to do what I think we've got to do, which is break out of a frame of how we're thinking and do things differently. We have got to think about climate change differently. We've got to, we've got statisticians that know how to analyze climate change. I don't honestly think we want to know the truth about it. I think otherwise we could have a lot of very important and very good information. So we need to tell the truth about flooding risk and climate change. We need new tools. And in my opinion, we're not close to being prepared for these storms because we're not talking honestly about these things. And with that, Rajiv did mention that I have a new book out. It's called Earth Church. It is available at Brazos Bookstore if anybody is so inclined. It's also available over at the Rothko Chapel Bookstore and at Christ Church Cathedral downtown. And kind of with that, Rajiv, if there's any questions, I would be happy to take them.
Sure, absolutely. So what I'll do, let me ask a few, and maybe that'll kind of get things warmed up. And then as the audience is listening, they can they can jump in with the chat. So one of the slides you were showing the path of Harvey. I'm looking for which slide that was. I think I noted it. How much is the right here? So that was a I don't know if it was unique compared to other hurricanes in that it did have a lot of wind and typical those type of characteristics. But what my understanding is that because of the temperature of the Gulf being so warm at that moment, it's just sort of soaked up so much energy and so much precipitation, and then it just kind of sat over southeast Texas. And could you touch on the temperature of the water in the Gulf and how that seems to be affecting like the potential for more catastrophe, if you will, and specifically with Harvey?
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is really why all of these reports are saying we're going to see more Category 3, 4, and 5 storms. I have not seen anything that indicates that we're going to have more storms. I don't think there's any consensus that there will be more storms, but there is consensus that the storms we have will be more intense. There'll be more Category 3, 4, and 5 storms rather than either tropical storms or 1 and 2. Now, the reason for that, hurricanes get their energy from the waters, the heat in the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. It's like a heat pump. A hurricane is literally a heat pump. And hot water basically runs that heat pump at a higher intensity than would be the case without the hotter water. I think I have seen, I can't remember the exact numbers, but the temperature of the Western Gulf has been steadily increasing over the last several decades. Hot air holds more water. So we get more evaporation with hotter water. We get more energy into the storm with hotter water. And we have the ability for the atmosphere to hold more water. Every one of those things suggests that the storms are going to get bigger. And I think that's exactly what happened with Harvey. That's what happened with Lara. Those are two examples of it happening here on the Gulf of Mexico, one in 2017, I think the other in 2019 or 2020.
Got it. Got it. Go the slide that you had about the Galveston Bay Park Plan, that visual. I don't know what you think. Is it slide 50? Yeah, that one right there. So a couple questions. So those gate houses that were sort of in, well, maybe this one or that the one that's, I guess that's on the books now, the coastal spine, is that more for storm surge protection? Because what I'm wondering is if you have those gates that go up for storm surge protection, but then during a hurricane, you've also got rain coming in. So, you know, on one hand, you don't want water to come in because of the storm surge, but on the other hand, you've got rain and you want water to get out. And so how do you reconcile that if it's all kind of happening at the same time?
Well, it's really not so much a problem down here on the coastal spine. This gauge structure, Galveston Bay has plenty of capacity to receive. Well, first of all, the surge will be coming at its peak when the storm comes in. Rainfall will continue for hours after the storm has made landfall, and it will take time for the rainfall runoff to get all the way to the coast. So one is that from a timing standpoint, Galveston Bay is going to be removed in terms of the rainfall coming into the bay. Where you have a problem, and the Corps is very worried about Dickinson Bayou gauge structure and Clear Lake gauge structure, because those are closest to the source of the runoff. And so they have massive pumps behind these two gates. And I believe the cost of each of these gauge structures is about $1 billion because of the cost of the pumps that they have. Now, coming over here to Galveston Bay Park, San Jacinto River is what we're primarily worried about from flood flow coming in. And that is going to lag by about 24 hours behind the receding of the surge. So these gates should be open by the time the San Jacinto is coming in. We've got modeling that indicates that. Perhaps a little closer issue is how fast does the water get in from Clear Lake, and will the gates be open there, or will there be enough capacity back behind these gates to absorb any of the rainwater that's coming in? We hopefully will receive funding in the next month to go forward with the next phase, and computer modeling about that issue will be critical. Among other things, the number of these types of structures, which are the lateral flow structures, these allow navigation, but they also allow the movement of water, and in this case, the evacuation of water from within this structure to the outside. This is another of those outlets. The number of outlets and the timing of the, if you will, the movement of the gates is going to be a critical part of that situation. It's an excellent question, Rajiv, and it's a very tricky issue, and it'll take every bit of engineering design competency that we have to get it right.
Got it. Got it. Now the coastal spine project you said that I think is in planning versus the one you were just showing here with the Galveston Bay Park Plan. Give us an idea cost wise. What are we talking about? Well, first of all, the Galveston Bay Park Plan, it's still a vision. It has not been approved, correct? Is it? No,
it's not approved. Galveston Bay Park Plan is a concept. It's right. If the work I'm talking about gets funded, and the city of Houston, Harris County, Port of Houston, and a private donor are considering funding this next phase, that funding would be to really determine, to really pin down costs. We think that the park plan will be $3 to $6 billion. And this coastal spine project, which includes environmental enhancement that goes down the coast, but it's got the dune system to 14 feet. It's got this huge gate structure here, and this is a really incredible engineering design feat to get this designed well and correctly. The backside levee around Galveston and these two gates here, I think the cost currently is in the $25 billion, $27 billion range.
Wow.
So it's a big ticket item. There's no question about it. They're doing a lot of work with that. Our proposal at the $3 to $6 billion level would also take the place of these two gates that are at the, say, $2 billion. So we could possibly, for an additional $4 billion, offer pretty much absolute protection from surge to the eastern side of Harris County, Kemah, Seabrook, all through that area, as well as Bayport and the Houston Ship Channel.
Okay, got it. And then that's the current the 25 to 30 billion, the coastal spine, that's just been funding we've been able to get from federal funding for that, or
that is proposed to be funded primarily from the federal government. The state legislature formed the Galveston Bay or Galveston Regional Protection District as a taxing entity over 6 counties to provide local funding to go with the Corps of Engineers funding. So we will be paying probably somewhere in the 25% range, is a wild guess on my part. That's usually a pretty 75, 25, 65, 35 cost share between the federal and the local or state government. And Texas has formed this district to create the tax, or to basically undertake the taxation to pay for the local share.
Got it.
But now that is, let me emphasize, this coastal spine is not fully approved yet. It has been approved kind of through round 1, but they are having to do much more detailed environmental impact work. And there will be phase 2 environmental impact statements prepared on almost all elements of this project. So it is a few years from completion to the point where it could actually be funded for construction.
Okay, got it. Okay. All right. Well, it looks like we have kind of a shy audience tonight. Nobody's participating in the Q&A. I'd invite Mike Leach on the line here. Mike is with our, he's the head of our public works department and whatnot. And Mike, was there any potential question you wanted to ask, or anything that you want to get to Jim here, possibly?
Thank you, Rajiv. No questions, really. I just wanted to really thank Jim for the very insightful, very detailed presentation. Very interesting topics there to contemplate, especially how all this interplays with the direct impacts on the city of Bel Air. It's fascinating stuff. It's always important to remember that it's easy to think of Bel Air as its own entity, but drainage knows no jurisdictional boundaries. So working together towards solutions that are actionable and feasible is really important. So Jim, thanks very much. I think your talk was terrific, and it really spoke to a lot of those principles.
Well, thank you very much. And I think, if anything, I think that we should be having more open discussion about climate change, because I think for so many years in the Houston region, we were very hesitant to talk about it because of the implications that it may have for the oil and gas industry. And I'm very much aware of that. And in a lot of my work over at the Baker Institute at Rice, we're looking at solutions for basically offering options for carbon capture and storage, on behalf of any emitting industry, including oil and gas. But because of our hesitancy to talk about climate change, I think that, frankly, our engineering community is behind the 8 ball a bit in terms of being kind of at the forefront of thinking about how to adjust and respond to climate change. And I think we've got a lot of catching up to do. And I would just encourage us all to talk more openly and honestly about these issues and to try to better understand them, because I think in the long term, our security will be affected by our failure to talk about it, and hopefully would be improved if we talk about it. But thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, Jim. And actually, before you sign off, let me see if we can get you for a minute, because a question or two did come in, and they're general in nature, and I thought we'd just at least get a chance to ask them, just sort of late-breaking questions here, and they're kind of general. But one question is, gosh, should we be considering selling our homes and moving out of the Houston region after hearing that?
And actually, the answer to that is no. Every part of the country is having this problem. I mean, this is a problem. You're seeing, Rajiv, you were talking before about how you were hit with massive windstorms in London, where they had 60-mile-an-hour winds. We have seen this most recent, I think, winter storm, certainly from last year, that just devastated Texas. I think more recently, we had a huge winter storm this year that was record snowfall. I think every part of the world is going to see these issues. I don't think, I had someone call me up and say, Blackburn, can you tell me where to move to? And the answer is, there's not going to be a place that's not affected by climate change. Now, some may do better than others. In the Western United States, the fire risk is incredible. The drought risk in the Southwest is significant. We're at the worst drought that we've had in probably history out in the Western United States. Lake Powell, I saw earlier this year, devastating water levels. You can't launch a boat from most of the boat ramps. The water level's 50 feet below the end of the boat ramp. That is the reality of today. I think, again, we have to talk about this and understand it. The key's not moving away, but it may be elevating, and it may be understanding better how to protect ourselves. But again, I don't think we're going to get there by kind of denying that it's happening. I think, it's sort of like quitting drinking or dealing with a lot of problems. We've got to get past denial. And I think denial has been just insidious in our community, in our country, where we really haven't talked about these issues. And frankly, it's been going on for 30 years. I mean, we had an international convention on climate change back in 1992. I feel like we've lost 30 years. We've got to make up for lost time. And I think, like I say, every city in the world is facing this. I think, if anything, we here in Houston have a bit of an advantage in that we got hit with Harvey, and we know the reality. We have seen 5 of these massive storms in 25 years that, kind of defy prediction. So we should be in a position to be at the front of responding to certainly the observed hazard, even though we haven't talked about the cause of the hazard so much.
Got it. Okay, and then I'll finish just with a comment and then a question. And again, I think you've actually even answered this, but the comment is, thanks for your talk. It's enlightening. Need to talk and have transparency, but worried about political will to have accurate scientific understanding of the issues at hand and doing the right thing to deal with these issues properly, not driven by the next election. So sorry, no actual question. Then the question is, in your opinion, why do you think politicians don't think the people can handle the truth?
Well, so I think, but it's an interesting question. I think that politicians, there's kind of 2 or 3 levels on it. One of the most interesting things, forget the former mayor of the city of Houston, who I can see but can't remember her name, told me the hardest thing you can ask a politician. Anise Parker told me the hardest thing you can ask a politician to do is to vote for a flood control improvement that will not be built in their term in office. And I think that's a wonderful insight into the mind of a politician. Most everything is about short-term turnaround. Right. These election cycles, for a U.S. rep, it's every 2 years. For the mayor of Houston, it's 4 years. I'm not sure what it is in Bel Air. But, those are the time periods. Those are the time frames. And so much of what we're talking about with climate change and with these big storms, well, you might make it 2 or 4 years without having this horrible event. So on the one hand, why talk about all of this doom and gloom when it may not happen during my term, or I may not have to deal with it? So I think part of it is kind of just a wish and a prayer that we don't have to deal with this. In terms of not trusting the public, I think that's a very interesting question. I've thought about it a lot. I think, one, there's a fear of mass reaction. If you think back on Hurricane Rita and the evacuation disaster of Hurricane Rita, on the one hand, that shows what happens when you tell everybody, down south to leave. It seemed like everybody in Houston tried to leave. So if you were to put out a warning that Addicks and Barker were going to flood, would that cause everybody to try to leave town? We don't have the training as a community. We're not trained how to respond to those instructions. We don't plan for disaster alerts to come through. I looked at a Japanese tsunami warning system, and it was the most incredible warning system I've ever seen. I mean, they had 5 different ways of getting a message to a household about a tsunami coming, but they trained about it. It was ingrained in the population that we have a warning system. It's for a purpose. There is a risk to living here, and we have to learn to live with that risk. We don't have that background. We don't have that training. And until we do, I think politicians will be fearful of telling the truth.
Excellent. Well, great. Well, that's highly appreciated your feedback. And this will be recorded, and we're going to disseminate this to folks in the community. There were a lot of folks that did sign up that couldn't make it, so I'm sure they'll be watching the recording. But thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate you taking the time, putting together such a wonderful presentation, and for sure we'll be keeping in touch, and maybe we'll have you back in the future again.
That would be great. And if anybody wants to contact me, my last name is Blackburn, and they only gave me 8 letters for my email address at Rice. So I am Blackburr, BLACKBUR at rice.edu.
Right. And actually put your email in the very last slide so they can get it in the recording.
Oh, good. Well, I didn't see that, but thank you, Rajiv. And thanks for asking me. I appreciate it. Take care.
All right. You have a good evening. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining. Okay. Bye-bye.